Rise of Kingdoms has an equipment problem, and it was brought to the community's attention once again with the reveal of the 2 new legendary accessories coming to the game. I showed these off in my most recent video, but today we need to talk about a couple of problems that stem from the reveal of these 2 new legendary accessories and how this problem actually extends to the entirety of the equipment system, and also what Rise of Kingdoms can do to solve this problem. So make sure you stay tuned, but first, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, this video is not sponsored, but if you guys appreciate my thoughts and opinions on this topic, definitely drop a thumbs up down below. On YouTube, the power is in the hands of the people, and likes help out the videos a ton. Now, the first thing that I want to touch on here is actually just clearing up some confusion that was caused by the most recent video where we discussed these new accessories coming to the game, and that is the cost of crafting these accessories. Okay, everyone saw this down here and got excited thinking, oh my god, it's only going to cost 60 legendary materials, which could be great news for people who are maybe looking forward to dismantling another accessory, because now they can craft this immediately. I'm sad to say, however, that in the video that revealed these new accessories, the developers were on the refine tab. I don't know if you can see it. I did a screenshot here, but I cropped it out by accident. But there's 4 tabs on the top: refine, awaken, and dismantle. Okay, the second tab is the refine tab. As you can see here, this is the first, this is the second, this is the cost to refine. And as you guys know, refining costs half the materials that it costs to craft that piece. So I don't know why they did that. Maybe it was just a mistake, but as you can see here, if 60 materials is the refine cost, and that's 50%, then it's safe to assume that it will be 120 materials to actually craft these 2 new accessories. Okay, so I just wanted to clear that up for you guys. It looks like these will not be cheaper accessories. I know a lot of people got confused. The second problem we have to talk about with these 2 new accessories is the glaringly obvious absence of true damage, of mighty healing. We have nothing to support the latest archer gimmick. Okay, and as I've stated on the channel multiple times now, and as people have reported from, I believe, the Dubai meetup, it seems like the developers for Rise of Kingdoms are straying away from the true damage gimmick. Now, of course, we don't know that for sure until they come out and say that publicly, or until the latest update for the next archers is just not true damage, right? I'd love for them to address that actually in a face-to-face with the developers and just come out and say it like, hey, we're not really interested in true damage right now. That would just clear everything up. But so far, we've seen in one face-to-face with the developer confirmation that new formations for smite, combo, and skill damage are coming soon and are going to be in a regular rotation, coming in regular frequency. They didn't talk about true damage there. Now we have 2 new accessories for combo and for smite. Once again, no mention of an accessory for true damage or even mighty healing, right? So that is like just another nail in the coffin for true damage, and really for archers as well, which leaves them high and dry. But the biggest problem with these 2 new accessories coming to the game is that we as a player base don't have a logical way to obtain these accessories on our accounts if we already have every accessory slot filled with a legendary accessory. This is something that was mentioned in a video by Shappy Gaming. This was mentioned in multiple videos, I believe at this point, by Chiskel Gaming, and this is a topic that I really want to take a deep dive in this video and explain kind of why the player base has the expectation that it does, right? Because as you guys know, when you dismantle equipment, you get a 100% return on your materials except for legendary quality equipment. Okay, everything else is a 100% return. Legendary is a 50% return, which is crazy. That is a massive downside to dismantling your legendary, so much so that I still have pieces like my Mora's Web and my Concealed Dagger that are not very good by today's standards, and yet I don't want to dismantle them because the value is horrible. It takes such a long time to get 60 legendary materials, so to just burn 60 and throw them in the garbage feels really bad as a player. And this is a problem because, as we saw with this latest update, there is a good chance that the new crystal tech system will have other stats besides attack, and if we get a bunch of defense and maybe even health in the upcoming crystal tech change, then that could completely change what we want to run as our quote unquote best in slot gear, right? And so everyone is kind of locked into all these like really expensive legendary pieces, and then as the game evolves, as we get more commanders, as we get new armaments and inscriptions and formations, and now as we get new crystal tech stats potentially, then we might want to, as players, modify the equipment that we have. And there's nothing more frustrating in a strategy game than knowing that you are not using the best in slot things, and yet you can't logically commit to changing your stuff to the new thing, because for one, you're heavily punished for dismantling, and two, who knows if down the line something else will make you want to change again. And this is where, you know, a few months ago people were dismantling some of their legendary accessories to craft war drums, and I was like, guys, you are out of your mind. Even if it is slightly better than whatever you had already, right? Now we have new accessories coming to the game, and maybe you would have rather had this than, you know, crafting that war drums a few months ago. And I tried not to, no pun intended here, but I was kind of banging the drum saying like, guys, don't do that. Okay, don't dismantle legendaries, because it's one of the most expensive things that you can do, right? Like that should be left to the giga krakens that have, like, they're just out of things to spend on, and so they might as well. If that's you, then congratulations. I honestly don't care what you do. You can do whatever you want because you can afford to do it, and that it is what it is. But then the question becomes, and this is really the debate here, okay? And I know a lot of new players and free-to-play players might be really confused about this debate, because you might be thinking, well, okay, Omniarch, that's fair, right? There is a sort of punishment to dismantling, right? That's obviously apparent. But what makes you expect that equipment should be eternal? What makes you expect that your investments in equipment should be permanent, that they should be static, that they should never be changing? Why isn't there the expectation that power creep will eventually affect equipment as well, right? After all, power creep has been in the game since day one when it comes to commanders, when it comes to crystal tech, when it comes to armaments, right? If we look at commanders as an example, back in the day, I expertised Herald, and I used Herald for a while he was part of the open field meta, and now he is no longer part of that open field meta, so he sits on the bench for basically eternity. I will probably never come back to Herald unless there is some crazy update that changes his damage factor, or he gets an absolutely ridiculous museum relic. There's really very few reasons for me to ever come back to Herald, and that is effectively the same thing as making my 690 legendary commander sculptures completely obsolete, right? They're basically in the garbage. I can't do anything with this investment anymore. And so you might be looking at equipment in the exact same way. You might be saying, okay, well, Omniarch, it's actually kind of better for equipment, is it not? Because you can at least dismantle something and get 50% of your value back. You can't dismantle an old Trajan and get 50% of your sculptures back, right? That's kind of an argument that I see people making here, and I do think that that is somewhat of a logical argument. You could also, from another perspective, say, well, what about crystal tech? Crystal tech is also temporary. You spend all this money on crystal tech and then it goes away, and then you have to spend again for more crystal tech. And do I even have to say anything about the new formations and the new armaments and everything like that? A lot of these armaments, you just end up recycling them for a fraction of their value, right? It's actually kind of insane. And so in a game where we see power creep for commanders, that basically makes our old investments obsolete, and we see power creep through armaments and formations and special inscriptions as well, that makes things obsolete. And then on top of that, we see the transient nature of KVK tech, and we can logically conclude that, okay, well, most systems in the game, except for like talents and your civilization, are pretty much always being power crept, right? So why do players assume or expect, why do players expect the equipment system to not have that same level of transient power creep that we see all the time? And that actually got me to thinking, right? I actually did have to stop and think about that argument for a second, because it's like, you know, why do we feel entitled to our legendary equipment never changing, right? Why do we feel entitled to a one and done investment in our equipment when we don't have that same expectation for commanders or for crystal tech, right? And in order to answer that question, I actually did a super deep dive on the history of the equipment equipment system. Okay, so we are going to go on a little bit of a roller coaster right now, and then later I'll talk about how the developers might be able to solve this problem. But if you guys didn't know, the game did not launch with an equipment system. The game launched with just commanders and talents, and the equipment system came into the game in August of 2019. Okay, that was about 1 year after the launch of the game. So the first year of Rise of Kingdoms was actually Rise of Civilizations, and there was no equipment in the game. When equipment did come into the game, it was very limited. There was basically the purple, blue, and green and gray pieces of equipment, and as far as I can remember, I don't even know, there might have been the crystal key pieces, right? But it was very limited, right? And I almost want to say that legendaries didn't even come out right away, but even still, that was the inception point of equipment. 1 year later, in August of 2020, the developers completely overhauled the equipment system, and in fact, lots of players got massive refunds on materials because they actually changed the material system entirely. There used to be 6 pieces of materials here that you could craft. If you guys were ever wondering, why is this panel so big here? Why is the UI so big for only 4 different pieces of material, right? It's because there used to be 6, I believe, and maybe they planned on adding more at some point. I have no idea, but there used to be at least 6. There was also a feather, and there was something else I can't remember exactly, but in August of 2020 they completely revamped that system. Ooh, what do we get here? Oh, garbage. Nice. But in August of 2020, they revamped this system, and that's when they added the set pieces for cavalry, infantry, and archers. And that's also when they added the KVK pieces. So the KVK weapons and the KVK helmets. Okay. And that was kind of the first instance of quote unquote power creep in the equipment system. But players didn't really feel that way because they got massive refunds on all of their materials that they may have spent up until that point, or at least that they may have hoarded up until that point. And then the equipment system didn't change for almost 2 years. The next update to the equipment system was the introduction of the iconic crystal, which came in April of 2022. And you could argue that this was a little bit of power creep in the equipment system. However, it was merely an addition on top of the equipment that you've already crafted. So it was exclusive to legendaries, and so it kind of did power creep out some of the lower quality pieces, right? So some of the blues and purples were not used as much after that, because now you're getting base stats from putting an iconic crystal into your legendaries. But at the end of the day, it wasn't that big of a deal because there was no materials involved. It was just you just added to your legendaries, and bada bing bada boom, there you go. The next change to the equipment system was in February of 2023, and that's when they added the purple siege equipment, the knights set. Okay, and I know it's not actually a set, which is very weird, but every slot has a knights piece here, so not sure why they did that, but yeah. Is it just me, or does this look like a Blue Eyes White Dragon themed piece? I really like that a lot. Anyway, once again, this is not power creep, right? They're just adding new pieces for an entirely new troop type, which is not that big of a deal, so people ignored it. Then 2 months later, in April of 2023, they added the leadership gear. This is the first kind of questionable change to the equipment system, and alongside that, they also added, from what I can tell, the lupine set. Now, the lupine set, you'll notice, does not actually have a weapon. The weapon here was, as far as I know, planned to be part of the set, but that's speculation. I actually have no idea. Clearly looks the same, right? Like visually it appears to be like it belongs in this set. Everything is wolf themed, but that's neither here nor there. That weapon did not come into the game at that time. All they did was add these 5 pieces. Okay, and the thing about the leadership set coming in April of 2023 is that this did start to cause people to question some of their previous investments, because now if you want to build your sort of best mixed garrison, well, now there's kind of an option for that, right? And alternatively, some people also looked at some of the pieces that they already had crafted potentially, like for example the Dragon's Breath tassets, which is the archer set piece legs, and they compared that to the health that you can get from the Glorious Goddess legs, and thought, well, actually, if I got this with a archer special talent and I got the 2-piece set bonus either from the boots or from the gloves, then I actually would be in a better spot here because it gives me more desirable stats, even though it's slightly less stats in total, right? And so this is where the community got a little bit flustered, but at the end of the day, these pieces do have less stats. I mean, just objectively, the numbers lower across the board. So even though you could argue that these are technically maybe the best in slot for archers, for example, some of the pieces are, you could at least say that it's such a small micro optimization that it didn't really move the needle, but some people were still a little bit frustrated. If you don't believe me, just ask Chiskel how he feels about the introduction of the leadership set. But my point is, from August of 2020 up until April of 2023, so almost 3 years, the equipment system didn't really see any sort of power creep, updates, or changes that led players to believe that their investments would be invalidated at some point. Now, around mid 2023, I don't know the exact date, but the developers did send out a mail telling everybody that great news, new equipment is actually on the way, and it's going to be level 55 equipment. Now, if you guys don't know, the KVK pieces are level 50, and so everybody knew that this new equipment, if it were to be legendary, would be likely more powerful than the existing equipment in the game. And this kind of sent everything into an uproar. And I remember, because I was there, okay, and I said that this is kind of a whale problem, it's not that big of a deal. Turns out the whales do end up keeping the lights on at the end of the day, and so the whales got all together and they made a whole post over on Discord, and I think a lot of people made videos about it and said, hey Lilith, this is not the right way to approach this, here's why, and they went ahead and did that, and there was tremendous backlash, right? And Lilith went back to the drawing board, retracted their statement, and said, hey, we're not going to do level 55 equipment. And then in December, I think it was like either the last day of November or December 1st, the iconic tier system came out, right? And this is where you could now awaken your equipment and you could go through the different iconic tiers, and this was kind of well received, right? Because you didn't have to craft a whole new set of equipment, and on top of that, it was a progression system, right? So you would incrementally get better and better things, whereas the refinement system, you didn't get anything until you finally got the special talent, right? And so yes, we finally did see some power creep in the equipment system, but again, we saw it in the form of equipment that we already had that we could make better. And then the final update that we got for the equipment system was actually in April of 2024. We got the Twilight Epiphany and we got the Immolating Plume. These are two new legendary pieces for ranged combat, okay? And ever since April of 2024, we haven't seen any changes to the equipment system. So besides the implementation of the leadership set, and besides the, you know, increasing or incremental power creep that we saw from the iconic tiers, we have never seen in our entirety of our Rise of Kingdoms journey, at least from the start of the new equipment system, which was August of 2020, from then up until now, we haven't really seen any insane amount of power creep in the equipment system that would require us dismantle legendaries, right? Pretty much if you crafted something back in August of 2020 and it was legendary or whatever, your first ever KVK weapon, right? Like those things you could still use all the way up until today, okay? And for that reason, there has been an expectation set by the developers, whether intended or not. The expectation is, hey, we haven't changed this system for basically almost what, 5 years now, and the updates that we have done have been incremental and built upon your existing things. Again, leadership set aside, that's micro optimization, and it had a whole reason to it, right? It's not like the leadership set was meant to replace any of the older gear. It was just supposed to be for mixed garrisons or for city defense, right? It was like the purpose was to allow you to have a full leadership garrison if you wanted to, right? So that's where the player expectation comes from. Now you could argue easily that, okay, well, the players had that expectation for 5 years, who cares, surprise, we're not going to avoid the equipment system anymore, we are going to add power creep, right? And that's possible. The devs could totally do that. They could totally say like, hey, you know, up until now you've gotten to use the same equipment for years, but it's time for new equipment, and they are within their right to do that, right? Just because we expect the system to stay the same that it's always been doesn't mean that it will always stay that way. But I did just want to give you guys this quick little history lesson as to why players have this expectation, and I should say that it is a pretty reasonable expectation to have, because again, I have crafted, let me just go ahead and show you here, and I kind of regret this, but it's, you know, it is what it is. I've crafted Shio's Return, right? I crafted this all the way back in the day, all the way back when this was like the only legendary boot that you could get. It was something that I could get my hands on pretty easily because you got it from the KVK Lost Canyon shop or whatever, and I figured like it's legendary, I'll craft it, whatever. And to this day, I can still use it. I can still use it because it has a special talent. It has iconic tier 5, so I get all the bonuses to march speed here, which is really quite nice. And is it best in slot? Not really. Do I wish I had something else? Yes, kind of. But again, anything that I would change it to is a micro optimization that isn't worth the massive penalty of dismantling this piece. And so for me, I think it is a reasonable expectation for players to have that, you know, you can continue to use your 5-year-old equipment because you've been able to do so for 5 years, right? And that's kind of the problem with these new accessories. Now, at first glance, and if you guys missed it, check out my most recent video, but at first glance, the new accessories don't seem game breaking, at least not with our current lineup of commanders, right? They might be quite good, but are they like so much better than the existing stuff that you absolutely need it for the open field? I don't know, and I'm not really convinced, at least not at the time of recording this. We'll have to see testing data first, right? But the point is, a player like me, I can't even justify crafting the new equipment because I've already got a legendary piece of a legendary accessory in every slot for every commander that I run in the open field, right? I mean, why would I dismantle any of that stuff if the new stuff is maybe only slightly better and I'm taking a massive penalty to do so, right? And this kind of limits what the developers can even do with the equipment system anyway, because again, players have this expectation that it won't change, and there's a huge penalty to even attempting to change it in the first place. And so of course players are not going to appreciate any major changes to the equipment system. And so what we need to do as a community is think about like, okay, well, first of all, again, the devs don't have to care. They don't really have to care what we think. They could just do whatever they want and say like, hey, you've gotten good value, you've gotten 5 years of value out of your equipment, it's the best investment you've ever made in this game. To be honest with you, there's no commander that you're still using 5 years later except maybe YSG, right? Maybe, and that's really a stretch. So you've never gotten such good value in this game before. It's time that we add new equipment, and at the end of the day, like, that would suck and it would go against our expectations, but they still could do that. However, I do think that there are some solutions that they could take to fix this problem. Okay, if they wanted to, they could actually go in and say, all right, we're going to add new accessories, but the old ones aren't very good. So what we're going to do is buff the old accessories to put them on par with the new accessories we're going to implement. That way, if you don't get to, or you don't want to dismantle your old stuff, at least the old stuff that you have is on par with the new stuff, right? And I think this is especially true with things like the concealed dagger and Mora's web, right? This is an embarrassingly weak debuff these days because this came out back before the armament system even existed, right? We have so much more defense now that a reduction of 4% is a joke. Who cares? That's barely anything at all, especially because not only that, but we've seen power creep in the form of better Zenith of Power City skins. And now with the implementation of the new crystal tech system, we might be seeing defense and health in the crystal tech as well, which is not confirmed, by the way, but that could be the case. So if that is true, then players are going to have even more defense and even more health walking around the battlefield, and these accessories are left in the dust, right? So if you did like a 3 or 4x buff to some of these older pieces, like the Mora's web and concealed dagger, like imagine you did a 15% health reduction every single time and it could stack up to 3 times. That would be quite good, right? I think that would be quite good, and that would put it on par with something a little bit stronger. So that's one route that they could take, right? If they wanted to add new equipment, they could simply buff the old equipment to pull it up to that same level, and then you could say, okay, well, at least I don't need to dismantle my old stuff to get the new stuff, and then the newer players or whatever can start to craft the new stuff. And you know, if you're a giga whale and you decide that that micro optimization is worth it to you, then you have to suffer the consequences of dismantling, and it is what it is. The other thing that they could do to solve this problem is something that they seem to love doing, and that is a swap system, right? We saw the commander swap system come out, and by the way, that was a one-time thing. I know a lot of people keep asking me like, oh, when is it coming back? It's not coming back. Okay, it is a one-time thing at the end of kvk2. If you've already done a commander swap on your account, you will not do another one. That was it. They made it very clear. They've also reiterated that very recently, that there is no plans for another commander swap event. They could change their mind, but as of right now, do not expect and do not plan for another commander swap event, because they said it's not happening. Okay, only for new players do they still get that event. But on top of that, we also have the armament swap, right? This is something that is just in the game permanently. We can always convert armaments with the conversion stones, right? And this kind of, you know, lends us to think that, okay, well, what if they did a accessory swap system or an equipment swap system? You could swap any piece of equipment for any other piece of equipment, either as a one-time thing or with some sort of currency. And true, right? That could solve this problem. It absolutely could. But if I'm being honest, I'm kind of tired of the swaps, right? It seems like a very complicated way to sort of patchwork and band-aid some of the problems with the older systems, right? It's almost like an admission that there's been too much power creep. And again, we don't need another swap for another system, right? Why not just instead improve the system itself instead of implementing a third type of swap, right? And so there's a couple of things that we can consider. And I think the very obvious solution here that almost everybody has kind of talked about, right, is give us 100% return on the dismantling of legendary equipment, right? This has always been a request from the community. And if you did this, we would still lose all our blueprints, right? And at this point, you know, somebody like me, if I were to go ahead and dismantle those same Shio's boots that we talked about before, Shio's return or whatever it's called, I would lose what, 5 blueprints from this, because you had to do the original craft. And then I have iconic tier 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? Remember, iconic tier 1 only uses a crystal. So that's 5 blueprints right there that I would just lose if I dismantled this. And that's not even to take into account all the ones that I used to get this special talent, right? And I don't know how many I used. I feel like it was a 25% each step of the way. So that's 9 blueprints, right? 9 legendary blueprints for this. So if I dismantle this, I only get 50% on materials back. Now, I actually can't remember, and it doesn't say here, do they give you back materials based on your iconic upgrades, or is it based on your special talents, or is it both, right? Because right now I'm getting a lot of materials back, and that's way more materials than it costs to even forge this, right? It only costs 40 to forge, so it's obviously giving me some compensation back for something. I don't remember exactly, but it is 50%. So whether it's 50% of everything I spent on it, or if it's only 50% for the craft plus the iconic tiers, or is it the craft plus the refinements, or maybe it's all 3, I have no idea. The point is, you're kind of getting wrecked here, right? You're kind of getting wrecked. So even if you bumped this up to 100%, I'm still losing 9 blueprints and an iconic crystal that I'll never get back, right? And it's important to know that players, I mean, maybe not for Shio's return, but players do spend money to get these blueprints, right? You do spend on the hunt for history, or on, you know, crystal tech to get the KVK pieces, right? Like KVK blueprints, I should say. So players do spend to get blueprints, and they're still losing that. So even if you gave back 100% materials, we're still getting screwed a little bit in that way, right? But it's just a little bit more fair because now you can use the materials other places. If the developers don't want to do that, which they do seem very, very reluctant to do that, I'll just be 100% honest with you guys. I don't know if I would ever bank on them doing that, but what they could do is give us a way to improve our dismantle returns. By that, I mean, what if a plain dismantle, right? Just a raw dismantle gives you 50% back. But what if you sacrificed a conversion stone and that bumps it up to 75 or 100% back, right? Well, now you're factoring in some amount of, you know, either currency or some other item in the game that is worth value, and you might lose that instead of losing 50% of your equipment value, right? And you know, it still kind of stinks, right? And right here we could see that the value of a conversion stone is $10. Okay, you do get some for free from KVK, obviously, but my point is, like, there's already lots of currencies and stones and items and things in the game where, you know, there's an opportunity here to introduce a system that is kind of a middle ground, right? Where, okay, we will give you 100% of your stuff back when you dismantle, but it's going to cost you, you know, a little bit of this or something like that, or whatever the case might be. So that way it's like, okay, there's still a small penalty to dismantling, but it's not a massive 50% loss in your materials plus all your blueprints plus your iconic crystal, right? I think that would be a nicer middle ground. And whether they use conversion stones, or they just straight up use gems, or they use some other currency that's in the game, Lord knows we've got a million currencies in Rise of Kingdoms that they can pick from these days. So I'm sure they could find one without introducing another one, right? That's kind of what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to avoid them adding yet another currency here. Okay, or maybe legendary equipment has a 30-day cooldown on dismantling, but you get 100% back, right? I think that would be fair as well. Like, okay, you can dismantle 1 legendary piece every month. That would be I mean, that's a big deal. You have to really think about whether you want to do that or not, right? I think that's another, maybe they could add that as a restriction to prevent players from just jumping around to different pieces willy-nilly. I think that would be fair. I'm just kind of spitballing ideas here that the developers can consider, because as it stands right now, I do think that the easiest solution to this problem would be to give players some way to dismantle their legendary stuff and craft new things, right? And this would also kind of open up the door for the developers to add even more equipment, right? Imagine if you got a 100% refund on some of this stuff, and then they added new equipment that was maybe slightly better but slightly more expensive, right? Well, now you're going to, you know, spend a little bit of time or money to accumulate more legendary materials and whatever, and then once you have enough, you dismantle your old legendary and then you craft the new thing, right? It kind of gives them more flexibility to expand this system. I feel like this system is kind of locked in a box right now because there's been 5 years of expectation that it can't or won't change, and anytime any little thing that they try to do to the system, the entire community goes in an uproar because there's such a massive penalty for dismantling some of these pieces. Another potential solution, and I don't know if the community is going to like this, but you could also just literally add 2 new slots, right? You just add 2 new slots, and you, instead of accessories, you call them trinkets, okay? And this is where you put like your everything new that you're going to put in here, right? This is where you put the 2 new accessories you just announced. This is where maybe you could even move some current accessories over to the trinket slot. So like, for example, the lucky coin is not very useful, so okay, move that out of the accessory slot into the trinket slot. I mean, it's a coin, for Christ's sakes, it would be the same size as a trinket, right? Or maybe you call these rings, right? Maybe you get 2 rings, 1 for each hand, and now everything that is a ring or ring adjacent or ring sized can go in the ring slots, and then the accessory slots are made for accessories, right? Like the ring of doom goes into the ring slot, this frees this up, so now you can go ahead and put the new saddle there, or you could put the new hilt there, whatever the case might be. Or you could even just, maybe you put 2 ones here, right? And you say, okay, this is the necklace slot. You could put 2 necklaces because you're a bling lord, okay? And you could rock 2 at the same time, and then everything that's like a necklace, for example, goes in the necklace slot, and then these slots down here stay as your accessories. And so that would include things like rings, or like whatever the saddle is, the hero's hilt, whatever the case might be, right? Like, there's ways that we can sort of expand this system that allows older players to not have to sacrifice what they currently have, and they can just start to build alongside the new players as well. The downside of that system is that, you know, eventually that's not a great long-term solution, because eventually you'll run into the same problem that we have now. If they did that though, the downside would be that new players now have a whole extra slot that they have to worry about on top of catching up with all the old players that have already filled everything in, right? And so the solution there would be to increase the amount of materials and blueprints that you get, maybe across the board, or maybe throughout the early game, right? Like maybe throughout kvk 1 and 2 and 3 you get like way more legendary materials to like catch up to that end game. That way it's a little bit more fair, right? Because I do see that as potentially being a problem. It's way worse for new players if they just add 2 new slots. They haven't even started working on the regular accessories yet, and then maybe these new slots can be a little bit cheaper, right? People kind of got excited when they saw that the new accessories could be only potentially 60 legendary materials, until players realized they were on the refined screen and that it wasn't actually cheaper, right? So again, those 2 new slots, maybe those new slots are literally just cheaper than the current accessories, and that might ease the blow a little bit for catching up players, as long as again they also get more materials to do so. That's kind of my little rant on, you know, the history of the equipment system, why players have this expectation, why it's not good to add power creep to the equipment system given that expectation, and some of the solutions that I think that the developers can take that the community might be okay with. Because here's the thing, guys, there's always going to be power creep in Rise of Kingdoms, whether it's commanders, whether it's armaments, formations, or equipment, there's always going to be power creep. And so if they don't power creep the equipment system, they're going to add a new system some other place down the line at some point to add more power creep in that way, right? And that could be just as bad. Now, I will say that the developers have gone on record saying that the majority of the biggest, or I should say, I think they might have even said all of the biggest systems in the game are already here, right? I don't know if they actually have any plans to add even more systems to the game. It wasn't that long ago that they did say that a majority of the biggest systems are already in the game. So, you know, another power creep system is unlikely at this point, but it's always on the table, right? It's always going to be on the table because this game is a business at the end of the day. And so, you know, if they don't eventually power creep the equipment system, that power creep is going to come somewhere else, whether it's in a new formation or in more commanders or faster commander release cycle or another system entirely. That could absolutely be the case. So those are just my thoughts and opinions, guys. I know this video was way longer and it was mostly just a rant, so hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you did, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, video. I hope you did. And while you're here, I hope you'll drop a thumbs up on it. It really helps out the channel a ton. It helps get this video out into the YouTube algorithm. YouTube really values engagement on videos these days. So any thumbs up, subscribe, comment, anything, it really helps out the channel a ton. And speaking of which, I'd love to know what you guys think about all of this in the comment section below. Do you agree with the player expectation that the equipment system shouldn't be power crept, even though all the other systems are? How do you feel about my proposed solution to this problem? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And while you're down there, consider subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell to be notified the next time I upload a Rise of Kingdoms video. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I will talk to you guys again soon. Peace.